Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jalen Jones, digital producer here at WRAL. Today, we switch gears on the topic and we go a little bit national. We head out there to the Midwest and we talk about 5 surprise tornadoes that popped up in Kansas City and caused a lot of damage. Well, with the recent National Weather Service cuts with less balloon data, that is why these tornadoes were a surprise. Well, let's sit down with Grant Skinner and our amazing meteorologist here, a part of our fantastic weather team, to talk about the North Carolina perspective and what those National Weather Service cuts may look like. We record this conversation on April the 17th, so if any updates happen after that, you guys can go and search for those as well. Here's that conversation. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. I got Grant Skinner, amazing meteorologist, part of our amazing WRAL weather team. Want to appreciate you for your time. And today we're talking about a phenomenon that happened in Kansas City, but could potentially happen here. Am I right? So what happened was due to the National Weather Service's cuts, there was a delay in tornado warnings, and there were 5 surprise tornadoes. Found this article on NBC, sent it to you.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, let's talk about it. What are we starting to see, or I guess now that tornado season is in full effect, are we starting to see the results of some of these National Weather Service cuts?
Well, yeah, we are now in severe weather season for a lot of the country. It's our severe weather season as well. We haven't been as active. We need the rain, but we haven't had as much. But it's certainly been more active out in the Midwest, and they have more active weather expected, in the coming days. And, as we go into the summertime, we see the Midwest having a lot more of that severe weather. So I think there is still a concern going forward that we could have more instances like this. And the reason for that is, there have been some cuts to the number of balloon launches that are done. Some have switched to doing only 1 a day instead of 2 launches a day. Others have just cut the launches altogether. And there's important data that we can get from those weather balloon launches in the upper parts of our atmosphere, that if we're not getting that data ahead of time, then it's harder for the forecast models to have a better idea of what's going to happen in the future. Because, one of the things that we preach about forecast model data is your forecast is only as good as its initial data. If you have less data points to go off of, it's harder to know what's going to happen in the future. That's what happened here. They couldn't get the measurements until midday. And that was after the morning model run. So it was closer to time whenever the model data was actually incorporated. And that could have played a part in not understanding, why there were going to be showers and storms that could have potentially be stronger. And the thing is, there has to be more research done to understand exactly if that was the specific reason for why the storms didn't pop up on model data. But one thing that was apparent was there was no upper air. There wasn't that upper air data before. Then they got the upper air data, and then the storms popped up. So I think it definitely could play a part in it, because that upper air data can only be received by a weather balloon. Now, airplanes also can get upper air data, but having a vertical profile from the surface all the way to the upper parts of the atmosphere, it's weather balloon launches, and it's just with less of those, that's a concern.
Absolutely. So I love podcasting with meteorologists, and what I'm learning a lot is meteorology has a lot of food references, and specifically, what is the recipe for this to happen?
Yeah.
And specifically, what ingredients does a weather balloon provide for the recipe that, let's say in the recipe, is a tornado, unfortunately?
Yeah, so there's an instrument called a radiosonde that's inside of the weather balloon. It gets launched into not inside the balloon itself, but it's attached to the weather balloon when it's launched in the air. And as that balloon goes up in the atmosphere, it's collecting all these different data points: temperature, dew point, or a measure of moisture in the atmosphere, the wind speeds, wind direction. So all these different pieces of data are being collected. And from that, calculations are made as well to understand how much energy is available in the atmosphere. What's the strength of the winds as you go from one part of the atmosphere to the other. There's all these different calculations that are made over time. And so getting that data is super valuable. So if you don't have a piece of information like from a weather balloon where you can see there's a diagram called there's a skew-T diagram that shows the vertical profile, but then there's another diagram that shows the kind of how the wind speed and wind direction changes as you go up in the atmosphere. It's like a vertical profile, basically. And I won't get all the details of that, but kind of that's a rough idea of what it is. And not having that specific data, that can show you if you have rotation in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have that, vital piece of data that you're seeing the rotation in the atmosphere that's conducive for supercell thunderstorms or tornadoes, not having that piece of information can be detrimental at times. Now, it's not to say that, because you didn't have one weather balloon launch, you're not going to know that there's just no spin in the atmosphere. There might have been some spin in the atmosphere to some degree.
Let's take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back.
How fundamental is having this weather balloon data to producing a forecast, specifically in Tornado Alley?
Oh, it's very fundamental. And having not just data within Tornado Alley, but also having the data out west as well, because the storms are moving from west to east, typically, across, from the Pacific Northwest or out west, and it's moving east into the Midwest and into the Tornado Alley, and then eventually makes its way towards North Carolina. And if you don't have, data that's like being transferred from place to place correctly, it's not going to translate well. And so and that's where some of the data has been lost, where either less launches are done at a different time, or there's no launches done at all. It's some of those stations out west. And so if we don't have the piece of information out west, once it gets to the Midwest, then we have a lack of information there.
I get it.
And that's not to say that it is the only cause for why, we might not know ahead of time about, but it's probably playing into the fact that we aren't having, not having some of that data is probably playing into the fact that we, might not have as much of a heads up about some of these events. With that specific event from the NBC article, they had to issue a tornado watch pretty close to whenever they had their first tornado warning. Now, the good thing is they could still get the watch out, ahead of time.
It was roughly around 30 minutes.
Yeah, and it wasn't a big lead time. But typically for a tornado watch, it happens, pretty far ahead. So it wasn't a huge lead time, but they were still able to get it out. And then tornado warnings were issued, accordingly. But that's tornado warnings are typically issued. They're issued based off of radar data typically. And so at that point, it's just, radar analysis. But tornado watches, that's looking at the analysis of the environment, and you need the upper air data to know what the entire environment is doing. So, I definitely think in terms of forecasting for tornadoes and getting tornado watches out timely, that's going to be your upper air data from the radio sonde and from the weather balloon.
And then I think my final question is, how can WRAL be affected by, let's say, these National Weather Service cuts? And North Carolina does have tornadoes. And does WRAL have tools to overcome this?
Yeah, I mean, we there are so many different pieces of information that we can use to help us out, to give us a better idea ahead of time. Ultimately, though, we don't do our own weather balloon launches. That is something that's,
a little bit of a monopoly for the National Weather Service.
Yeah, they typically are the ones that do that, and it's very it's expensive pieces of equipment, first of all, and also, we just don't. We don't have the resources to do that. So, they're done by the Weather Service. If cuts are made there, then we just don't have pieces of data. And keep in mind, it's not even just about having the weather balloon. It's about being able to put that data into a weather model, because the Weather Service also runs their own models. They have the American model. They have the high resolution rapid refresh model that we use for severe weather. So those convective models that show storms and stuff like that, you need this data to go into that. And so it's a kind of all of it's like a domino effect, basically. So I think for us, there could be a ripple effect from data not collected out west, but the good news is that there are enough launches, I think, done immediately to our west, where I don't think it has as big of an impact on us. The big impact would be if there was like staffing problems, which I mean that's going to be sporadic by weather service office, and I know our weather service office and others surrounding, they try to do the best with, when we have severe weather, they've got staffing on hand for whatever they need. So, but I think my biggest concern is with specific events like this out to our west, where you don't have the data from the Rockies and like kind of that general area, with some of that data lacking. Some places might be caught by surprise. I think that we here locally are able to do a pretty good job of getting the forecast out ahead of time. We know what the ingredients are going to be like. Now, doesn't mean that the severe event always happens. We had that happen recently where it was a higher severe threat and the ingredients were there, or the possibility for the ingredients to come together were there, but it just didn't come together at the right time. And so we were spared by the worst of the severe weather. That was good for us, but at the same time, when you forecast that, you're like, oh man,
Absolutely.
You're like, is that going to happen? And so glad that didn't happen. But again, I think we had the resources to kind of know what was going to happen ahead of time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. And again, just wanted to talk about this unique situation as the National Weather Service's cuts are kind of starting to affect us for tornado season as well.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay here, but I think I'm long term, we'll have to watch and see just how funding looks, how if weather balloon launches change at all, in our area. The good news is that we haven't had any big changes in our specific area with those launches. It's mainly those stations out to our west.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for diving into this with me.
Of course, yeah.
And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.